Wayne, let's go ahead and go live. Good morning. I call this meeting to order and thank you again for joining us. As you know, this is a public meeting and all audio and video is being streamed to YouTube for public viewing. If you are not speaking, please keep your microphone on mute, and just like yesterday, keep your video feed on when able so our guests have faces to present to. Yesterday, we received the annual data briefings from 5 of our comprehensive universities, and this morning we will hear from NKU, UK, U of L, and Kctcs. The process will remain the same as yesterday, with the exception of the Kctcs. We'll have an hour time slot due to the number of campuses the system must report on. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? If not, let's get started then. The first institution presenting this morning is Northern Kentucky University, and I'll turn it over to you, President Padilla.
Thank you so much, Chair Brandstetter. Good morning, and good morning to all the council members. Let's see, the last few days at Northern Kentucky have reminded me about the 3 winters I survived in Minnesota. So it's a brisk morning here. So I know we want to keep plenty of time for questions and comments that you may have. And so I'm going to keep my presentation very short. You've obviously had a chance to review the placemat, and if there are questions, I'm happy to address them. Let me just begin with some high level framework context for NKU. Over the last years, I'm completing my 3rd year in June. It'll be 3 years at NKU of the privilege to serve this wonderful institution. And just as a matter of context, our strategic framework is called Success by Design. It has a laser focus on advancing student success aligned with the needs of the region. As many of you know, I think NKU has established itself as a leader nationally as a steward of place. We take our regional stewardship mission very seriously, and it's of course one of the things that attracted me to NKU in the first place. And since my arrival, we've decided to create a new strategic plan. We call it a framework because it gives us a little bit of flexibility to adjust along the way. In 2019, essentially less than 1 year after my arrival, Success by Design is a framework which was created with a great deal of vetting across campus and the community, was unanimously approved by my board in April. And since then, of course, we've been focused on that. Success by Design has 3 essential pillars. One has to do with access. Again, none of these pillars will be surprising or different for many of you. Our focus is on making sure that NKU's educational opportunities are available to a diverse set of population. We know the transformative nature of what public education does. And so we want to make sure that we continue to find unique ways to, and I'll give you a couple of examples along the way about that as well. So access is our first pillar. How do we ensure that more diverse learners have an opportunity to take advantage of NKU's educational programs? The second pillar is completion. It's one that I think we need to continue to remain highly focused. It's one thing to provide access to students and learners, but we cannot simply say that once you're here, you're left to figure out things for yourself. Our commitment and vision is to become nationally recognized as a student-ready, regionally engaged institution. The concept of student readiness is somewhat new to higher education. For decades, we always talk about our students ready for college. We talk about college readiness, and we focus a lot on all those elements. And while those certainly are important, I don't think we've given as much emphasis to our institutions ready to serve the diverse populations we have the privilege to serve. What are we doing to change practices, policies, and structures to better serve first-generation, low-income students of color that are now the new American majority? And of course, as the demographics change, we have to be even more mindful of that. So the second pillar is completion, making sure our students move towards progression and of course, eventually complete their degrees, certificates, credentials. And then moving on to the third pillar is career and community engagement. We want to ensure that all our students lead meaningful lives, but also have fulfilling careers. And that's an important element. We don't believe those are mutually exclusive. In fact, if anything, the last few months have taught us how critical it is to be engaged as civic citizens of this region. I think many of you may know this, but over 80% of our alumni remain in this region. So we know that we power Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati's economies. We are a big factor in delivering the economic, social, and cultural vitality that this region needs. So really very proud of all the work that we've continued to do. Now, the last 10 months have been, shall we say, slightly different than what we've seen perhaps in a century. And I think, as with any of my colleagues, we've had to deal with the pandemic, the social crisis, the economic crisis, and quite frankly, an information crisis that we see around in our citizenry as well. But I think the good part of what I'd like to report to you is that because of our focus on success by design and the constant idea of what could we be doing to help students succeed, the pivot in March to adapt to virtual operations was actually a lot more possible, because everybody really knew that the first question we had to answer to ourselves when the pandemic hit was, how do we ensure that our students stay on their educational journey and stay on track? So let me just maybe make some quick references to the data you have in front of you, which of course is based on the 2019 and 20, and we continue to focus on this. I think a couple of high-level good news things. While there's completely, and I'll be the first one to admit it, we have still a tremendous room for improvement. We are seeing some really good progress on some of the key metrics that you see here. 6-year graduation rates, first year to second year retention, number of degrees awarded, and of course, we continue to be one of the lowest net price providers in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, which of course speaks to affordability. While we still have some ways to go to close the equity gaps, but I think the progress we have seen is very encouraging, and it's one that I think allows us to keep our focus when you see these kinds of results as well. So I'm not going to go into all the details here, but just to give you a sense, the data that you have for the graduation rate, of course, is an all-time high. We still have, as I said, room for improvement. We've exceeded our targets for both overall and for the URM populations. We actually expect this metric to continue to improve, because we are looking at our next, this was based on the 2014 cohort, but as we've looked at how the other cohorts are doing, they're actually improving on both retention and persistence. So we're very hopeful that those rates will actually continue to improve. And of course, our goal is to not only meet our targets, but also continue to do them. A couple of things that we focused on, no different than what you've seen at other institutions, perhaps. Using data-informed practices, we use a student success collaborative platform that is called Navigate, which allows us for coordinated advising across the institution. So it's not looked at in silos. We have ramped up our focus and utilization of micro grants and scholarships. And we've really made a concerted effort at using a coordinated care model. So the holistic approach of the students is important. Degrees conferred, again, you can see we've actually exceeded our target, especially in the undergraduate STEM degrees, URM degrees, and graduate degrees. Graduate degree, both, and it's reflected in enrollment as well, has really gone quite high. And we have seen these three areas of degree production having increased by almost 20% since 2015. So really very impressive. We're obviously delighted about the STEM H and graduate degrees as well. And again, we are seeing some growth of URM degrees. We're delighted about continuing to do that. But we know that this is going to be a challenge, given that our undergraduate enrollment still remains pretty soft. And it's a topic I'm going to switch to next. This is something that I think we have to keep focusing on, which is why the access pillar. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of some pipeline programs we've established just in the past year alone. One is called the River City Promise, in conjunction with our good partners, Gateway Community and Technical College, to basically say that all the students who are Pell eligible from the 6 River City high schools will have an ease of transfer to Gateway, and from there to NKU. For these students, we've basically made the commitment that if they are Pell eligible, they will pay no out-of-pocket tuition costs. And the idea was to make sure that the seed of college is planted in each of one of these seeds. When I came in, I noticed that we weren't attracting as many students from these high schools, and they happen to be right in our communities as well. For those of you familiar with Northern Kentucky, you know we're talking about Bellevue, Dayton, Ludlow. These are the schools, and I was just wondering, why are we not drawing more students from these schools? And part of it was because they have severe socioeconomic challenges. And I think perhaps the idea of college itself was too far-fetched. So we said, let's eliminate as many barriers. And working with my colleague, Fernando Figueroa, we said, we're going to make a promise to these students. In fact, just to give you a highlight, it's not part of the discussion, but we have 42 students enrolled currently at Gateway, which are part of the River City Promise. And Fernando and I checked on them last fall, unfortunately via Zoom, and we are keeping a track on how these students continue to perform so that we create additional pipelines. We're also working with Cincinnati Public Schools, another large district right across the river, but many of their students, I think we find are a better fit for NKU than perhaps some of our other larger institutions in this region. And we're also looking at some renewed emphasis between other partnerships we can continue to develop. First year to second year retention, I think, has been, again, extremely positive. And you can see we have achieved probably some of the highest rates for the institution. And this is something we will continue to focus on as we move forward. A lot of the good work has to do with early programs. We have a program called Summer Spark. And even last summer, despite the pandemic, we went virtual and we expanded the capacity. That typically was a program of about 50 or 60 students. We had over 200 students in a virtual environment. It's a free program for our incoming students to get them ready for the work of college. And we feel it was a great success, and we'll continue to see some of those. But things like Summer Spark, University Connect, and Persist program, our TRIO programs, all have been very much focused on. We have two additional programs to serve our students of color. One is called NKU Rocks, which is specifically targeted to our African-American students. And the other is NKU LAMP, which is targeted to our Latino students. And both have continued to show progress with respect to metrics on student retention. Just a couple of other things. Average credit hours at graduation, we remain pretty flat. It's still, as you can see, 10 credits higher than what is expected. Just want to point out to the council that there is a difference between our transfer students, who tend to have at least 10 credits more on the average than our native freshman students. So that, and 1/3 of our graduating class typically tends to be transfer students. We still are compare very favorably to the other institutions, but we know that continuing to focus on degree audit, streamlining the curriculum, providing better pathways and degree maps is something we can continue to do. And that will be something that we focus on as well. I've already mentioned the net price, but let me spend just a minute or two before I turn it back to you, Chair Brandstetter, for any questions on the success of underprepared students in Gateway courses. This continues to be, I think, an area that we have work to do. Yes, we have seen some modest improvements. Actually, I will add that if you actually project, we've done some preliminary work. This was based on the fall of 2018. And if you look at some of the fall 2019 information, we can see that over 70% of our students have actually progressed successfully with respect to English, and over 55% have progressed successfully. This is all preliminary data, so you don't have it with you, but this is where we are looking at it to see that they have progressed in math. So we know that we have some work to do there. And actually we have done something both with the English placement, along with some of our statistics courses that we are doing, which are showing some promise. As you know, the co-requisite model has been put into place now. It was in the early infancy. As that becomes more institutionalized, we expect to see some results there. On the English front, I'll mention one program that we have piloted just this past fall, and it's called NKU Write, W-R-I-T-E. And it is basically our version of directed self-placement. For those of you that may not be familiar, directed self-placement is a national model that talks about letting students determine which English course they feel prepared for, rather than the stigma of assigning them to a remedial course. The idea would be to say, look, here are some questions, get a better handle on what you think, and place yourself. Do you want to do a 1-semester English course or a two-semester stretch composition course? And we've tried to pilot that program. It's a national best practice, and we're looking at ways in which we can improve that. And we hope that over the course of time, that's something we can certainly address as well. In the packet that was sent to you as just an extra material, you'll just get a glimpse of some of the big programs that we have done over the last couple of years. I mentioned the River City Promise. I failed to mention the Young Scholars Academy. This is one with our Kenton County School District, in which high achieving juniors and seniors will come to NKU full-time and will be taking courses right here on our campus. We launched that program just this fall, and we have over 80 students. And I can say that their performance in the midterms and final grades of last semester have been actually very good and promising. So another pathway to promising students from our region to come to campus as well. I will highlight one important feature that I think has been nationally recognized. It's our advising model. We have really tried to ramp that up. Our advisors, master advisors, have received training in diversity, equity, and inclusion, cultural competence, and that actually was highlighted in a national conference only in December, because it just showed how much this is going to be critical for us. This work of equity and inclusion of diversity has always been front and center, but I think the urgency of this work has become exacerbated over the last 1 year as we've seen the disparate effects of the pandemic on our students of color and frankly, communities of color as well. So there are some examples of ways in which we have highlighted our work in access, in completion, as well as in career and community engagement in the brochure that you have, which hopefully was submitted to you before this. And of course, let me pause now, Chair Brandstetter, and provide plenty of time for questions from the council.
All right, thank you. I'll open up the floor to questions, comments. Kim, you're unmuted. I'll call on you.
Thank you, Ben. President Padilla, thank you for the report. I guess I'm just looking and wondering, as you're preparing for what will be the next incoming freshman class, what are the things that you're looking at or that you're looking at with your leadership team and your board that you see as presenting challenges for you, and how are you trying to sort of stem the concerns around ensuring that you have a solid incoming class?
Yeah, that's a very important, relevant question. Of course, all eyes are, we've been in this, a little bit of this crisis mode, I think, which is not surprising for many of you. We noticed our students, we actually didn't have as many challenges as we thought we would have for our last fall enrollment. We actually we seem to have done better than expected, which was actually good. But the challenge we saw as the fall progressed was really in disengagement of our students and the fact that many of them were not registering in time for the spring. And so, of course, that has cumulative effects. I'm going to talk again about the incoming class in just a second, but really our efforts over the late fall and continue to now was to make sure that our students continue to persist and move from fall to spring. And we've closed the gap that was actually as high as 10 or 12%. We're still a couple of percentage points in our entering first year students. Their persistence has not been as good as we expected. A lot of it has to do with disengagement. We're finding new ways to make sure we engage that class of 2024, even as we speak. And then we're looking ahead to fall, and we're seeing, of course, that the number of applications are down. It's not surprising given where things are around the country. We are extremely grateful for the stimulus funds that we've received, because we're really helping our continuing students, sort of get their financial assistance out there. So as you said, there are challenges with respect to fall, but every time there are challenges, and I think, Kim, some of the members of my board, they're always going to look for where are the opportunities, right? What are we doing differently that we have to think about for this fall? And I've really challenged our team to think a couple of different ways in which we could do pipelines. Now, let me tell you that not only do we have virtual tours for many of our students and their families, we continue to have physical tours on campus every day, including Saturday. So we haven't changed some of that. And part of it is to make sure that we keep enforcing the mind. We have begun having, since late fall, for both prospective students and their families, regular check-ins via Zoom. And I step in for a few minutes and talk to them, because the same questions are, what will fall look like? How will you have new different kinds of engagement? What kind of campus vibrancy will be there? And while we can't answer all those questions definitively, given how things are still very uncertain, we can talk about some of the commitments we've done, some of the ways in which we continue to be creative in which we've done that. I'll give you a small example. It might seem very trivial, and it's there in your packet, but NKU launched our first varsity esports team this year. And believe me, I would have thought, well, that's nice to, it was kind of a facetious thing for me to say last year. We're bringing on a new sports program. Everybody got excited about what I was going to announce. And I said, it's esports, which, by the way, as you know, is one of the fastest growing competitive sports. I think you can call it sports around the country. Well, the response to new students, especially high school students, this is a growing interest in all across Kentucky high schools. And so it has really become, and frankly, by the way, our team went into all the way to the Final Four in one of the Rocket League championships. So we were undefeated right till the end, beating such teams as, and I know Lily is going to be next, such teams as University of Kansas and others. We actually did lose to Kansas in the semifinals. But the fact of the matter is that has generated some great deal of interest in how we can do this. So we are looking, I think, taking a much more holistic view. Incoming freshmen is clearly an opportunity that we have to focus on. And I'm not really bought into this idea that demographics is destiny. I mentioned, we serve the entire region. I know that we're focused on the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I mentioned the River City Promise, but Cincinnati Public Schools offers us an opportunity that I think NKU has not fully introduced quite as much as we should have. We don't get as many students from CPS, and somehow the river seems to be a major challenge. They have wonderful diversity of population, and I want to make sure I've had some great conversations with their superintendent. We have a plan in the works. We've actually doubled the number. It's not a big number, but we've doubled the number from last fall to this fall. And we're going to try and focus again to make sure that we get more of those students to think of NKU as a great option for that. So we're going to do a couple of different things. The last thing I'll mention is something that we actually began last year with a certificate program. If you've seen the new Pell eligibility allows second chance citizens to also be eligible for Pell. This is an opportunity with respect to the prison population that we're paying some close attention to. We've actually initiated a certificate program with respect to the local detention center here, but that could easily become a degree completion program over time. So small steps, but looking at, as I said, thinking differently about the kinds of populations we have to serve and provide educational opportunities there.
Thanks, Ashish. Dr. Babar, please get you in here.
Yeah, Dr. Vidya, please pardon me for my mask and all that. I'm in hospital right now. I know that you have really good, strong nursing programs. How are you, the students are getting clinical exposure in this pandemic when it's so limited?
Absolutely, and it's been a challenge. Obviously, we have worked very closely with our partners here. St. Elizabeth Healthcare is a great partner of ours when it comes to our health programs in general. And we certainly had to make adjustments in the spring semester of last year and finding some alternative ways for them to complete their clinicals. We actually, as many of you, had to get some special dispensation, and thanks to the work that Aaron Thompson and CPE did with the Kentucky Department of Nursing, so that we could actually allow our students to graduate in time. But we are, as the situations have changed, we're finding safe ways, because again, most of our clinicals are with St. Elizabeth and their facilities. So we're finding ways in which our students can get some opportunities in sort of a high flex hybrid context to do that. And that will continue this semester as well. So it's an ongoing challenge. I can say that our students who are in the clinical rotations have in fact been allowed to get the vaccinations as part of the phased approach, as also as more recently our students who are going to be in clinicals in the K through 12 sector will be getting their vaccinations. So we're hopeful that we're turning the corner when it comes to clinical placements.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Dr. Stat?
Yes, I want to follow up just a little bit with your Cincinnati connection work. Actually, I think that's very good. Now, as I recall, you do have reciprocity with on tuition basis with the Northern Kentucky group, but also from a cost standpoint, there are some schools on the other side of the river. How do you stack up relative to cost-wise with them? Not just the University of Cincinnati, but some of the other smaller schools. Are you competitive, better, or where do you stand on that?
We are, Robert, and thank you for that question. Actually, Aaron knows this very well. When I first came on board, we started talking a little bit about, this, I have to agree, very convoluted tuition structure, depending on which county you were part of and whether you were part of the metro and so on. And I said, listen, if I'm finding this confusing, can you just imagine what many of the parents and the students across the river might be finding about this? So we've streamlined our tuition structure. We call it the EDGE program. Aaron and I had many conversations in the early stages, essentially make it, 23% of my students come from Ohio. And so we know that we cannot, and it had reached the point, to your point, Robert, which was we had reached the point when in fact we were not competitive with the University of Cincinnati. And it was just going to be, even though I will say that many of our programs are as good, if not better, the quality of education. But the fact is the students do pay attention to price. And if they see the tuition being higher, that creates a challenge for us. So we've eliminated that disparity. We may have some more work to do in making sure the students know that. And that's part of the communication that we're doing with them. But I'll tell you the one thing that I've heard over the last year and a half about the biggest roadblock for many of the students, it happens to be transportation. The idea, yep, and just the ability to come across. There is, and I think some of us can be pretty honest about it. I think there is a little bit of this, at the back of your mind, am I really going to go all the way to Kentucky? And it's not all the way. You're 6 miles. I mean, for someone who's spent 25 years in Los Angeles, I find that, well, let me just say, if I had a 6 mile commute to work, I would be in heaven. But we have more work to do to, it's a big step for many of those students, and we're really thinking that that's an opportunity for the students to discover. I feel that what we hear from the students, and by the way, we also hear this from our partners at Cincinnati State, that NKU is a better fit than some of the larger institutions because they will get a much greater attention, a greater sense of belonging, a greater high level of care. So, we're going to keep pursuing that opportunity.
I'm going to fit Colby in real quick. We've got a couple more minutes left. So Colby, if you could take yourself off mute and you're up.
Yeah, I'll make it a quick question. You talked a lot about, specifically when you talked about your different initiatives targeted at the different communities that aren't necessarily pursuing a degree. You mentioned briefly that some of them don't think maybe it's an option for them, or some of don't think it's a possibility. And I'm worried this year with a lot of the students that are going to be applying for this next year, your university, they finished their last year of high school in the COVID era, doing school online, maybe having to study for the ACT among different things. So I can only imagine that maybe scores on ACT and grades are going to be lessened than their previous years in high school. Are you concerned that that's going to cause less people to apply? And do you guys have any initiatives targeted at increasing that thought that people have this option to pursue a degree, even if this past year proved less successful than it could have been?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Colby. Well, I'm very pleased to say that part of the vetting process that happened internally, we are a test optional campus. So we decided, I think along with some of the other colleagues of mine, we decided that, and frankly, it is long overdue, to be perfectly honest. Many of you probably know this, but national best practices have shown that ACT and SAT scores are not a very good predictor of college success. They're a very good predictor of your parents' education and perhaps your income level, but they have very little to do with how you persist. So we have gone test optional. We've taken another step, by the way. We've also made it optional with respect to scholarship qualifications, so that it's not just about because we know it's not just about getting in. The biggest question students have, is that, how will I be able to pay for college? And so we've made it very clear that not only is a test optional, but essentially we're not making that as a requirement for eligibility for scholarship and institutional aid. So again, we're trying to get as many of these barriers down. And you're so right. I mean, we are concerned about what these students have completed in their high schools. And to do that, as you can imagine, we're already in conversations about what the fall is going to look like and what can we definitively say. I made one mistake. Well, perhaps I made many mistakes, but I did make one mistake that I felt pretty badly about last year. Just prior to the spring commencement, I said, we can't have spring commencement, but we'll have to do it virtually. But December, this was back in April when I made the decision. Don't worry, in December, we're going to all come together and we're going to have an in-person commencement. Well, guess what happened? Things were just becoming worse. And I had to eat my words and say, well, you know what, we're not. So I've learned my lesson. I don't promise what you can't actually deliver. So we're really trying to make sure that our students are thinking about ways. One small thing, I know we are out of time, Chair Bruns, a great suggestion was made by one of my colleagues about saying students are looking for engagement on campus. And we've started a program this spring, which is called Pitch a Program. We're asking students to be empowered to pitch a engagement program that can happen on campus, assuming we have safe protocols around those. And I understand that within the next couple of weeks, we'll get a few proposals for doing something on campus in a safe way. The students really want to have something there. And we've said, all right, just as we're trying to do with our athletics programs, let's find a way to engage our students on campus, but then put some wraparound health and safety protocols around that. So giving students a little bit more voice in how they'd like to see their experience, even though they have these challenges. So.
Ashish, I want to jump in before Ben goes to the next one and say it's been great working with you this year. Your focus on student success and the way you're designing the process to make sure they get in and get out. We've had a lot of conversations and I really appreciate that camaraderie and our ability to really look for good solutions. So thank you a lot, my friend.
Very good. Thank you, Aaron. And I have to say the same likewise. CP has been, and Aaron's leadership has been vital to that. It really made my job a lot easier because that's the focus of the council and for the Commonwealth. So it's a really great way to be working in collaboration with that and our other universities.
All right, Ashish, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for talking about opportunities and how your board is challenging you to find new opportunities, especially in this current environment. So wouldn't expect anything less from your board, and glad to hear your report back on that. Thank you for joining us today. All right, that gets us through all of our comprehensive universities, and thank you everybody for good questions and engagement. Now we're going to move on to University of Louisville, and Dr. Pendaputi, thank you for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you and engaging with you this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so very much. Let me begin by truly extending my sincere gratitude to you, Chair Brandstetter, to all of the council members, to Dr. Thompson, the CPE, and all of my fellow presidents. This summer will mark 3 years since I've been here. And as you can imagine, these 3 years in Louisville and at the University of Louisville have been challenging and interesting, but I will also hold filled with opportunity. I do want to, as they pull up the slide and walk us through the placemat and so on, say a big thank you to my team, my provost, Dr. Boehm, at our EVP for research, Kevin Gardner, everybody, our enrollment management, et cetera, et cetera. I really hope you'll take a minute and look at the leave behind we gave you. It's just a one-pager. One side has our principles, our values by which we make our decisions, and the other side highlights the big wins for 2020. And I really wanted to do that to thank the team. So I hope you have a moment to take a look at that. As we go through this placemat, again, a terrific idea. And the data, the transparency and availability of data are something that I really applaud CPE for and all of you for pushing for it. As you all know, there are 29 metrics that we are asked to monitor. And I'm pleased to tell you that on 26 of those, we show improvement from the base year. I will be sure to talk about the 3 that we are missing because I'm that kind of student. I'm happy about the 26, but I promise you I'll get to the 3 where there's room for improvement as well. So talking about the metrics that are on here, our 6-year graduation. Our overall graduation rate, as you can see, is 60.4%. So it actually meets and slightly exceeds the goal for 21. I am very happy to see the continued improvement in both our underrepresented minority and our low-income graduation rates. With URM, I'm happy to tell you that it is the highest in the state, and it's a point of pride that my provost and I have been asked to speak about that at national conferences, webinars, and so on. With low-income graduates, that is something that's a really big concern for me. We're the second highest in the state, but we are being more mindful of it, that this is something we need to address because through our strategic plan, we've actually doubled need-based aid that we give to our first-time freshmen, but it's something that continues to concern me. As we look at our overall degrees and credentials, we met the 2021 goal and in fact increased it by about 15% since 2015-16. Again, great source of pride for my team that we've also exceeded the 2021 goal for underrepresented minority and STEM and age degrees. We will not be complacent because I know that we have to constantly strive to do better for our sakes, for the students' sakes, for the Commonwealth, but that is also a point of pride. Enrollment. This is something, again, that would not have happened without the hard work of Jim Begani, Jenny Sawyer, the whole team. We have the strongest enrollment of all Kentucky public universities, as you know. And in fact, we see a growth across most categories except one, and I will address that. That's one of the 3 areas that we need to improve upon. Let me talk a little bit about diversity enrollment. We have seen increases across all categories. And in fact, we exceed 2021 goals for undergraduate Hispanic, Latino, undergraduate underrepresented minority students, and graduate underrepresented and Black minority students. This is something that the University of Louisville has worked hard at for many, many years, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to carry on this legacy and push us to do more. In fact, if you look at our Latina enrollment, it's the highest percentage in the state. And other than Kentucky State University, we have the highest percentage of undergraduate Black students. And Mr. Chairman, I'm sure that you've seen this before. We were recognized for this achievement by the Education Trust as one of only 2 universities to get an A in terms of nationally among our highly competitive public universities for these percentages. An area that we need to make an improvement on is our first to second year retention. This is something we are carefully looking at. And I will tell you, and there'll be room for questions, of course, but as I look at the year coming up, I worry about that because students in Louisville have been very hard hit, of course, all across the country, but not just the pandemic and the financial concerns, but the social justice issues that so many of them have been actively engaged in. So I'm proud that others in the state, my colleagues, have figured out how to do this, and I fully intend to learn from them and do better on this. Average credit hours at graduation. We see a decrease and we're making steady progress. But there are 2 things that I would say. I know the transfer students is something that my colleague Dr. Vaidya mentioned. The other thing is I'm doing a deep dive to see exactly why. if students are taking this for a double major, what is happening? Is that actually helping them? Because on many of these, as you know, it's really about the return on their investment. Another area that we are really looking at is the success of our underprepared students in gateway courses. I'm very proud that in math, if you look, because we put a real conscious focus on this since the time I have been here, and you'll see that it's pretty big increase, a 43% increase from 2015-16. And that's really the work of the team. We have a REACH Center, which is for academic success, moving the math courses to an emporium model rather than a lecture course. So lots and lots of interventions. So we're very, very proud of that. Now on English, it's another area where I've seen a drop since 2015-16. Now we're still the highest among Kentucky publics, but I don't think that we can just rest on those laurels. We are investigating it. We do not know why that happened, but it's something that we will be focusing on. The last aspect on this placemat is the average net price. And this is, again, if you look at where we are, excuse me, one of the things I want to point out to you is that the Institute for College Access and Insight, this is an organization, it's college.insight.org. Of course, Dr. Thompson is very well aware of it. It's a great source. They show us not just the percentage of students who have debt, but also what their average college debt is. And this is where we see that Murray State is the lowest at 53% of their students having college debt. We're not far behind. Ours is 54% of our students have college debt. But the number that is particularly pleasing to me is that of all the Kentucky public universities, our students have the lowest average debt in terms of what it is. It's about $24,650 for us, and that is the lowest of all the Kentucky public universities. So it's a lot of work. I will say it's because of many of our students take advantage of the UPS work program. We encourage things like that, but that's something we keep a very, very close eye on. We're still about 9% lower than UK, and that's something that we always benchmark as well. I promised you I would talk to you about the 3 areas where we need to do better, the 3 out of the 29. One is in undergraduate adult population, 25 through 64. This is a category that across all Kentucky public universities, we've seen a dip. And ours is the second smallest dip, but I do think this is something we at the University of Louisville really need to pay attention to. So hopefully next year, you will see that we've made specific strides to focus on this, and hopefully you'll see an improvement. The second metric on which we need to do better is our diversity of our tenured and tenure track faculty. If you look from our baseline of 10.7, we're now at 10.4%. We really need to be paying attention to that, and we are going to be mindful. I'll come back to that again. And the last one I've already told you about preparation in English. So that is an overview of where we are. I will tell you, I find this incredibly helpful. It's good for people to know the rules of the game. It's a good way for us to indicate our priority. To leave ample time for questions, I will end with this. At our university, we talk about being a great place to learn, a great place to work, a great place to invest, because we are a place that celebrates diversity, fosters equity, and strives for inclusion. Many of you may have heard, or maybe not, it's a little egoistic of me, to say that we have talked about being a premier metropolitan research university. That's the mandate given by you and by the legislature, but that we are going to be the premier anti-racist metropolitan research agency, educational institution. Sorry, I'm trying to speak even faster than normal. But I will tell you, I'm a very proud business person. I was dean of a business school, and I have said, and I continue to maintain, in the private sector, more is done around diversity than in educational institutions. So if you think this anti-racism agenda is something new that I've signed on to, it's not. A year and a half ago, I signed the University of Louisville. We pledged to be part of the CEO Action Forum. These are colleagues, these are people I know. I encourage you to look at it. So you will see that the signatories are from American Airlines, the Cleveland Clinic, Cisco, EY, Humana, Procter & Gamble. We are in that category to say we need to do more. If these private sector institutions are finding that diversity and inclusion is the right thing to do, we really ought to step up as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions at all.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up to council interaction. Carol, I think you've got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you for the report. I just have a quick question on your undergraduate enrollment. A lot of the universities have seen a decline from fall 19 to fall 2020, and it looks like you've had just a slight increase. And I was just wondering what the University of Louisville was doing differently.
I think that there's many things I would say. It's not just one thing that I would point out to. Some really incredible work by our enrollment team to recruit, to use our student ambassadors. We've really put in a focus on getting people to fill out their FAFSA forms so that they know that they can afford college. In addition, some of our programs have helped as well in terms of trying to attract students. We are, again, credit goes to our enrollment management team and our provost and the, I don't know if it's any one thing. We've really built strong pipelines. That's something we believe in, where I have to say thank you to Dr. Polio, who's our school superintendent, JCPS superintendent, as you know, as well as Ty Handy, Dr. Handy with the Jefferson Community College system. So we're trying really, Carol, to pay attention to all of these. I do hope to investigate. I'm always afraid to say this is the reason because 1 year does not a trend make. So I'm hoping we see this and we'd be happy to share more. But thank you for noticing that.
Thank you.
Vidya?
Morning, Neely.
Good morning, Vidya.
Wanted to follow up on the comment that you made about the drop off in sophomores returning after the freshman year. I know that there's entire, areas to address remedial training. I know, I'm not sure what the terminology is that the university uses, but there's an outreach department that tries to get students where they have learning gaps and tries to help them continue along the pipeline. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that area is doing and, are there areas to be strengthened there so that there's not that decline between first year and second year enrollment?
I would say that at any level, when students drop out, I like to call it the ABC. You can see it's just to keep it simple. Is it academic preparedness? The C is the cost of attendance, but the B is the sense of belonging. And I will tell you that all three need to be looked at when people leave. A lot of times, students will plan for their first year of college costs and won't really think through how to pay for all of college. And so it's on us. We're really investing now in emergency loans. We are trying to coach students, work with them closely. The academic preparedness, there's a lot to that too. Telling them it's okay to go seek help. A lot of them, remember, we have a very high percentage of students who have neither financial capital nor social capital. For an R1 university, of the 130 R1s, 40% of our students are Pell eligible. That is just an extraordinary number among R1s. So we're trying to do more on the academic preparedness and financial. But I don't want us to lose sight of the belonging. the sense of belonging, mental health. That is a crisis across universities. If you and I have struggled with the pandemic, that's something that has really impacted this group. So what we are doing is trying to address all three, help students to find a community. We call it re-recruiting our students. So it's not enough to assume that they're here forever. Every single semester, we need to make sure. So intrusive advising, reaching out to them when they seem to be in trouble. I know there'll be many questions, but I have to tell you this. We even looked at how we were sending a message. Well-intentioned, we have a warning system that tells you, you know what, you better watch out. You're not doing so well in this class, right? How does it read to the student? That we need to look at the messaging we send out to say, at this point in the semester, you're not doing what you need to do, but here are the things you've got to do to turn it around. So every single thing we say, because to us, it's obvious that there's a way for them to correct it, but for that young person, they may have no idea how to address that. And I'm very proud of what we've done around mental health too. We're investing, we're taking away the stigma, we've moved it to the center of campus so more students can have access, moved everything online, but these are some of the measures that we are taking. But I hope it helps you, just the ABC. That's what we really need to work on.
Richard?
Dr. Bendaputi, thank you for your update. You've all done an outstanding job increasing your graduation rate. In just 5 years, there's been significant increases there. Good job on that. Wondering if you could tell us one or two or maybe three significant things you've implemented to see those the grad rate increase.
One really is a program we have called Find Your Fit. That's to help our sophomores who are not sure yet what they want to do. I'm proud of that because that too has been showcased nationally. So freshman year, you're getting used to it, but the sooner they find their fit. So if you're a student that's undecided, I try to tell them not to call themselves undecided. I tell them to think of themselves as deciding. You know, undecided isn't a status, they're still deciding. So we're actively working with those students. The second thing we're doing is really looking at small amounts that are causing students to drop out. That is a very real issue for us. So again, as I said, the emergency loans, looking at that. And then above all, advising. Our advisors are heroes. We really need even more of them. We need to do more to celebrate them, but building that relationship and making sure they're getting consistent messages across. So these would be three that I would mention.
So just a quick follow-up. So would you say the sense of belonging, you said the advising has played a large role, but is that sense of belonging instilled in the students? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, you know what? Yes, sir. I'm saying that sense of belonging has to come from many activities. You've heard many of us talk about this. As a residential university, that prides itself on offering face-to-face, if all we do is impart knowledge, I will use the old Army leadership credo, to know, to be, and to do. If all it is about knowing, then why should they ever come on campus? We can just teach them. The sense of belonging comes from who are you, not just what you know or what you do, but who are you? What is your identity? So that idea of I belong here. This is very important for our minority students. Actually, it's important for every single human being. If we think about how we feel in a place we are unwelcome, it's hard to be successful there. So to me, belonging is, I tell every student, I do give my cell phone number to every student, as you know, but it's to tell them the only reason we exist is because of you. You are not an imposition. You belong here. Sorry if it's something very important. Do we have welcoming spaces? Do they feel like they're intruding? We still have a long ways to go, but I look at what we've done on UofL Health side, where, when you think about a hospital and how much we invest in people like Dr. Babar to say, Do you feel like you can ask a question? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel listened to? So that's why the cardinal values, the reason I used up a whole slide to put the values on that leave behind is, it's who are we? How do we treat each other?
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you so
Laurie?
much.
Just to follow on a little bit about the discussion on the 6-year graduation rate. And I almost hate to ask this question since you are the highest in the state, but I am curious. I noticed over the last 3 years, we've seen a slight decline in the URM percentage. And I didn't know if you all had explored that to find out ways that you could maybe improve.
We are looking at it, and it's actually on an uptick again, but it's a good point. We look at it very closely. For a lot of them, it is the financial, because the way we break it down, the Venn diagram isn't there always of the underrepresented and the low income. So what we find is we've got to do more with the low income. Not everybody who's a minority is low income by any means. I'm not making that characterization, but that's the weak link that we found, Lori. So we will be trying to address that. Because this is the idea that they don't have the financial capital, but they also don't have the social capital of someone to tell them, this is how you navigate the system. This is where you can go.
Dr. Ben, yes, thank you, Ben. Dr. Bendapudi, this is Babar. So first of all, I want to thank you that being a Louisvillian, I have witnessed that when you took over, those were trying times. And thank you for restoring the community's trust and the integrity of our university. And also, because our university is not only the biggest employer and research, but it also the whole community and whole Commonwealth looks up to our universities, that they leads us. The past year has been very difficult, and I want to ask you, and you've been very proactive, and I read in the papers about Butch Baird and how actively you reached out to him. These challenges which our students are facing and across the political spectrum, across our nation. And what do you think that in coming years, how is our university, is it well prepared to move forward, and how can we empower our students, and how as a community, as CPE board members, that we can assist to make sure that playing field is even for all of our students?
Thank you. That was a lot of questions. So I hope you will give me a couple of minutes to answer. Thank you. First, one thing is that many of you know, I always wear my UFL badge on or pin or something. That's to remind me that every day I have to make sure that my job, all of us are temporary stewards, no matter how long we're in our offices, to say temporary stewards of great institutions. And that's something I take very seriously. I do believe we are well positioned to tackle this. If as institutions of higher education, our whole reason for being is to transform lives for the better, to transform the lives of students, their families, and the communities. So if we don't tackle these, who will? We've got to address it. It doesn't mean we have the magic bullet, the real answer, but it's something that we are deeply committed. I know, bold of me, but I speak for all of my colleague presidents. We think about these issues, we wrestle with these issues, and I feel very optimistic. So you as council members, thank you, because if you didn't make these a priority, if you did not ask us, because you all know what you measure, you manage. And so if you don't ask us these questions, hopefully we'd still think they were incredibly important, but by forcing us to answer these, you give us a platform to share that with all of our people, so that we say we are all aligned in terms of what we are trying to do. I feel incredibly optimistic. I guess Rabbi Hillel, if not us, who? If not now, when? So each of us has to step up. I do think this is not at all a political issue. I really believe that good people of all political persuasions want an anti-racist world. And the way I use it, because it comes up again and again, racism is the simple idea that a person is inherently inferior or superior to another just because of the color of their skin. And as Dr. Barber would tell us, what a minute genetic difference that is. And so the anti-racism pledge we are making is simply that nobody is inherently inferior or superior because of the color of their skin. I think this is a worthy thing to do for the Commonwealth, and there's challenges, but that's what makes it worthwhile. The opportunity on the other side.
Dr. Stat, did you have one? We have time for one more.
Actually, it's not a question. I just want to say, Neely, appreciate the kudos to Beth Beam as she steps back into the deanship at the graduate school. She's done a good job, and thank you for recognizing her.
Oh, she's extraordinary. And I will tell you that our shared governance leaders, that's somebody else that I want to say, our faculty governance chair, staff governance, student governance, we couldn't do this without them.
Neely, I know we're at the end, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'll go with Mohammed's statement about your dedication, not just to your campus, but to each of the individuals on your campus has been wonderful. You and I, as you well know, we won't tell all our stories, but I mean, the conversations we've had offline to tackle big issues, that I am just thoroughly overjoyed that you're in this state, because you don't play with it. You go for it, and you are dedicated at every level to make sure that it happens. So I wanted to say that in front of the council members, because they don't get to see, they get to see what's here. They may get to see some outcomes, but I get to see the things that you're doing at the most granular level to make sure it happens. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. I call Aaron for advice on more things than I can tell you. And one thing you all can do as council members in a post-COVID world, please come and spend some time with us. It would be such an honor and a joy to host you.
Thank you, Neely, for joining us today. Informative session as always, and we look forward to seeing you in person real soon.
Thank you.
All right, up next, University of Kentucky, President Capilouto. I see him there. And there he is. The floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. Thank you all for being here and your service to our Commonwealth. I have to say what makes our campus remarkable, and that campus extends to all 120 counties in the form of our extension offices, is I believe people wake up every morning and ask themselves how we can better meet our commitment to be the university of, for, and with Kentucky. And I know those of you who may frequent our campus and know a lot about it may not recognize its uniqueness. And I salute the Commonwealth of creating something that is this remarkable. We're one of probably 8 universities in the country that has on a contiguous campus this broad array of disciplines and colleges. And what does that mean? It's manifest to me nearly every day, but it allows us to respond in unique ways when the Commonwealth needs us. I told Commissioner Stack that if it was possible to get vaccine, we would make a commitment to vaccinate every employee who works in our K-12 system in the county. In less than 2 weeks, we vaccinated 6,500 of those individuals, 758 first responders. To be able to morph a football stadium into a vaccination center where your wait is just minutes, to build the technology that one can get an appointment in advance, and also for months be one of the easy access drive-through testing sites in our county. Just one example. And this morning we announced our most significant partnership on our healthcare system, a joint venture with King's Daughters Hospital and their health system in Ashland, Kentucky. We have over 50 clinical affiliations through our Markey Cancer Center, our Guild Heart Institute, our Stroke Center, We have 200 other outreach areas. You know that without any new state support, we set up in partnership with Western Kentucky University, Northern Kentucky University, and health systems in those areas, 2 four-year medical campuses. A few years ago, we only admitted 136 medical students. Through those partnerships, we can now admit 200 a year. And we know that those individuals that train in those areas have a tendency to stay there. We met what we thought was a national crisis, and certainly one in Kentucky, to be one of 4 universities to be awarded a Healing Communities grant, a nearly $90 million grant to reduce opioid deaths by 40% in 3 years. And just one example of our response to the second pandemic that poisons our minds and hearts. We have several work streams working on our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, but we launched Unite, United in Equity, a $10 million research program on our campus to address these issues across our Commonwealth. So I have to tip my hat to all these people who make this possible. I know our emphasis today is undergraduate research, and I'll turn to that now. First of all, our 6-year graduation rate. We have a lofty aspiration of a 70% 6-year graduation rate. To put that in context, there's some 4,000 to 4,500 colleges and universities in the United States. Only about 150 of them have a 6-year graduation rate of 70% or higher. And that includes the Ivy Leagues, the very selective universities. You can see that we have had a steady climb up to 66%, slight downtick this last year, up across all groups. And that takes individuals, programs, processes, all working together to turn a variety of levers. A slight downtick in 2019 and 20, as we look at it, certainly attributed to COVID, and a significant downturn in some of our summer baccalaureate degrees that were awarded, down some 35%. Going to the degrees awarded, steady increase over time. Over the last 4 years, 15% increase overall, 45% increase amongst underrepresented minorities, 26% increase in the STEM fields, graduate and professionals up 7%, low income, not as much as we'd like at 5%, but our last couple of years that I'll talk to you about in terms of retention have me positive about the future. When we look at our undergraduate enrollment, first of all, we set a record at the University of Kentucky this year. It's the first time our overall enrollment was up over 31,000. If you look at undergraduate enrollment that has been steady with some sort of slight decreases, I want to give some additional granularity to that. This last year, for instance, our first-year freshman numbers were down slightly, but our returning student numbers across all of our classes were up. At the same time, with our steady increase in graduation rate, we're getting students out the door quicker. 10 years ago, only 30-some-odd% of our students would graduate in 4 years. That's over 50% now, as one example. We have expanded the enrollment of our underrepresented minorities, up some 1,500 students since 10 years ago. The proportion of our class is 17% now. And in adult education, not a big number for us, but I am proud of something we introduced 3 years ago. We call it Project Graduate. Those individuals who had 30, 60 hours remaining may have been away from the university for 20 years. We opened the door wider for them, enroll some 200 students a year. Last year, we awarded nearly 200 degrees to those individuals. Many of them who are so proud for the first time in their life to tell their family members they reached that milestone. Next, I'll talk about our first to second year retention. Again, a steady increase, 81.7 to 85.9% in the last 4 years. Steady increases, underrepresented minority, up 5 percentage points. Low income, up 6 percentage points. And if you look at 18, 19, 19, and 20, you see good increases that make me confident about what we'll be able to see in a few years in terms of our number of graduates and our graduation rates. One of the things that I would highlight that we evolved here a few years ago and remain impressed by its power. It's something we've expanded, and that is our LEADS program, where we try to close the gap between the cost of attendance and the totality of one's grants and scholarships they don't have to pay back in loans. We found through various pilot programs that if we could shrink that to less than $5,000, the likelihood of a student coming back starts increasing dramatically. We have shifted our financial aid significantly in this way, and we feel good about the next few years to continue positive trends. Next, when you look at the average credit hours at graduation, again, small, slight decline, but as I think Neely mentioned, we certainly notice an uptick in students who come in with more college credits. I think we have 65% that come in with college credits, and a steady increase of the number of hours they come in with. But many of those students are choosing a second major, I think further enhancing their academic credentials, or picking up certificates while they remain undergraduate students. And moving on to success of our unprepared students. We have fluctuation here. You can see improvements in math, declines in English, but this also represents small numbers using the criteria that we follow. For instance, last year, there were less than 100 students in the English category. In math, we changed the instrument we used to assess that. Some 300 students have had success there. And we believe that those courses and experiences are important because from our data, if one completes those successfully, it telegraphs good upticks in returning for the second year and the third year. And finally, I'm pleased to report some positive news when it comes to average net price and total cost of attendance. You will see that in this last year alone, we had a 4% increase in the average net price. And that is a reflection of that LEADS program that I mentioned earlier, and our continued increasing investments in scholarship and grants, especially for needy students. 25% of our Kentuckians come from families whose average income is around $19,000. With that, I'll stop and certainly entertain your questions, but thank you again for your service.
Thank you, Dr. Capilouto. All right, I'll open it up to comments, questions. Who's first on this round?
While people are getting ready, Eli, thank you once again for a lot of things, but especially what you're doing in this pandemic. I also want to personally thank you the way you handle this past fall and testing your students, getting them to a place where they got their academic achievement as well as keeping them safe is nothing short of miraculous in my mind, because I mean, that was something that, as you all know, we dealt with every week, talked about every week. So that I want to give you thanks for up front in front of everybody. The other thing too, two other things. One, how you're focusing on your underrepresented is in truth something that we were hoping we'd see out of UK over the years as the representative flagship. You in fact stepped up and did it. What you're doing with those that need need-based aid and doing it in a very proactive, predictive manner and not wait till it hits you in the face is also something that, you know, a lot of people are now modeling. So I want to thank you for that, because none of these things come about without a very proactive leadership. So I just wanted to upfront say thank you.
Aaron, I appreciate your guidance through all of this. You've been a wonderful partner, and successes we've had are because of an incredible team spirit. So thank you for saying those things.
Dr. Capilouto, or Eric, go ahead.
Thank you. President Capilouto, I note on looking at your enrollment and demographics that it appears fully 1/3 of your student body is from out of state. And as we consider enrollment for other institutions, I know it's not necessarily apples to apples here, but I'm curious what you all do to bring such a large population in from out of state, how you see that as being successful.
Sure. Thank you for the question. We have I think a data analytic approach to where we think we could be most successful in recruiting. We have pipelines that have certainly opened up in neighboring states. We have students who are looking for a experience at a residential campus. Ours unique that, as I mentioned earlier, everything from ag to medicine to law, you name it, it is here. We're able to get students early exposure to high impact experiences like research. When you're doing $450 million of funded research on campus and in community, we have opportunities there. So we go out and compete with institutions who look like us, and given our investments in the campus, the teamwork, I think we offer a tremendous value. But we have recruiters, we use our alumni, some communities we've been in for a good while, so it's word of mouth. And again, a team approach.
Dr. Capilouto, this is Dr. Barber. Thank you so much for your leadership and everything which you are doing for our Commonwealth. We truly appreciate you. I have a question regarding food insecurity. That I remember that in 2019, there were concerns about food insecurity on campus among the students. In 2020, of course, there were not many in-person classes for long, but now coming hopefully in 2021 and 2022, that when we will have on-campus classes, what do you think that because of the pandemic may affect the students and the percentage of students who are food insecure that may rise? So any thoughts on those lines?
Yes, first of all, in terms of food insecurity, if you look back at that LEADS program, what we're trying to do is shrink that gap. People can use those funds in a variety of ways, including meal programs and all. But working with our dining partner, we came up quickly with creative solutions. One of those, for instance, was a healthy meal for $1. It was pre-prepared, nutritious. We work with them in terms of the healthy foods we provide and anticipate providing through a pandemic, which we think are going to be important and to be aligned. In terms of looking forward to the fall, we have a panel of experts. We call it our START team. We created this soon after we suspended classes last March. It's made up of public health experts, infectious disease physicians, health behaviorists, you name it. We'll be turning to them to talk about what kind of scenarios we see for the fall. I hate to speculate when we're still getting information about vaccines and variants. We were one of the sites to test for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We'll be having a press conference about that this afternoon with one of our physician investigators who's part of that. We've got to bank a lot in science. We're also testing the therapeutics. I think how we advance on those is still going to greatly influence what our fall looks like.
Thank you so much.
Morning, Dr. Capilouto. It's great to hear your update. I have a slightly different question that I don't think we've asked any of the other presidents so far. I'd love to understand the impact of the pandemic on college sports and how that has affected revenues for the university over the last year, how you foresee that being impacted into the next budget year. And also, in addition to the actual dollars, there's probably some other social impact, not very positive from a community standpoint. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that and, how president should be thinking about, or how you're thinking about what that looks like when things do return to normal. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. When we suspended all activities in March, that included athletics. And, given how tight that community is, the oversight of it, we certainly saw probably earliest in that community the concerns that you would expect when you don't have something that's structured and organized. So, as we reopened our medical center, because we had suspended elective procedures, and we were able to learn from that, as we did screening and testing and so forth. The next group that came back on campus were students. Now, so, it's 400 or 500 students. We're able to start honing our testing, isolation, tracing. So being a learning community, that turned out to be helpful in the plans we made for reopening campus. What have we learned from the extensive testing, tracing, screening that we do? I'd have to say we had over 6,000 people we screened who had been exposed, a few thousand cases. We didn't see any evidence of classroom spread. And really amongst our healthcare workers and our student athletes, we didn't see spread in terms of where they compete. It's the same for all of us. You let your guard down, you get in a community setting, you want to gather with people, boom, that virus doesn't care who it infects. So we have had to be rigorous in that. We certainly want to respect the state's guidance when it comes to assembling people. And I'm glad that we're doing that, because that is an opportunity for community spread. So you mentioned the financial consequence. It's significant. We reported to our board of trustees that we'd have anticipating a $35 million gap in our athletic budget. We think there are ways to close that, already taking steps to do so. I am proud that our athletic program is entirely self-sufficient. It doesn't collect a dime of student fees. It pays, just like UK healthcare, It pays an overhead for the services it uses on campus, from grounds, utilities, maintenance, the accounting department. So it pays its way. And it also tens of millions of dollars of scholarships for its student athletes, but also for a general student population. And it is financing $112 million science building on our campus. It's covering 2/3 of that cost. It's so important to, I think, the spirit, vitality, what Neely talked about, sense of belonging on our campus and far beyond it. So I think it is vitally important that we kept it moving forward. And I'd have to say, I appreciate the Southeastern Conference. Before the NCAA had a medical task force, we set one up. That group met daily. We found a way that we thought we could open safely. We knew it would still have disruptions. We're going to have more so probably in basketball because of the things inherent in it. But to keep that experience going, and nothing is riskless, I think we should be proud of what we've been able to accomplish.
Thank you.
Dr. Stad.
Actually, I don't have a real serious question, other than I note in the background you have a shovel. Is that for handling some of the issues coming into your office?
So, Dr. Stott, I won't comment on your suggested metaphor there, but I will tell you this. Most of these shovels were given to me because they were used at groundbreakings, and I think
I assumed that, but
$2.7 billion of construction we've had in the last 10 years, 6 million square feet and all. But there's one shovel I keep for another reason. It was given to me because it was used at the groundbreaking for the proposed aluminum plant in Ashland, Kentucky. And I think you all know that that was disappointingly unsuccessful. I was there for a ribbon cutting. I saw how much hope that partnership, that initiative meant to that community. We have been working for nearly 10 months on a partnership with King's Daughters Hospital. I look at that shovel every day to say, whatever we do, it must endure, it must be successful. We cannot let Kentucky down. So some people ask me why I keep that shovel. And it's a reminder of our commitment to one another.
thank you for a very good comment.
Kevin.
President Capilouto, thanks for your time this morning. Following up on the shovel, I live virtually in the backyard of the campus, and am always amazed at the job that you and your administration has done in transforming the campus. And I was just wondering, what's the next big phase, and where do you take the campus from where it is now?
Well, I recently had a 30, 45-minute conversation with all of our deans. We can meet together and all, but I asked them a series of questions. And I think one of the most serious ones we have to ask is, what does higher education look like post-pandemic? At UK Healthcare, Dr. Newman, our executive vice president, said we had probably a 5-year plan for telehealth, which we did in 6 months, maybe 6 weeks. We were pushed, and look what we did. So now we had to embrace technology. How are we going to use that in the future to leverage what we do? There's a continuum from that in-person to virtual. And we shouldn't look at it at just a bifurcation or two extremes. It's a continuum. So if accounting firms want to have internships and co-ops during tax season, why should we have semesters that fall in just, fall and spring? What can we do now? I also, in my walks around campus, found those individuals that are adapting their courses and tell me how, even though they remained in person, they were able to infuse this technology to leverage learning. And I've seen great examples of that across campus. So you got to rethink your infrastructure. We have entire buildings that we have outsourced the back operations for our healthcare system successfully. The question is, are we going to need that space in the future? So those are the kinds of questions we're going to have to ask ourselves. I think we're going to have to answer them more quickly than a lot of people anticipate. We cannot just put our head above ground and say, what's going on? I can't answer that question, but I think it's the most important one.
Dr. Capilouto, thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us, your insight, and appreciate the candid answers to our questions.
And for those who don't know, I just want to throw in, Eli, you don't look it, I promise you, but Eli's our longest serving president currently. So,
and Aaron, I might be our oldest president too. Which the benefit it had for me is, I got in the early category for vaccines. I mean, that's still have to get.
You're only as old as you feel.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's a frame of mind, and the honor of living on campus with a large group of 18 to 20-year-olds will keep you young, I promise.
Great. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to take a short break, about 15 minutes, and we will reconvene at 10:45. All right, we are back, and we have wrapped up our comprehensive presidents. We wrapped up our research institution presidents, and now we're moving on to Kctcs. Just as a reminder, we do have an hour allocated for this, so we should not be on as much of a time crunch, and we can engage further with Kctcs. Want to welcome Kctcs interim president Paul Zapparata, Western Kentucky CTC president Anton Reese, and Jefferson County CTC associate vice president Terry Sellers. And there he is. All right, Paul, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair Brandstetter, President Thompson, and members of the council. My name is Paul Zapparata. I'm the interim president of Kctcs. This is my first time reporting to the council, so my nerves are getting a little the best of me, so I'll try to slow down my pace. Before I begin, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the tireless work President Thompson and his staff have done on behalf of Kctcs and the universities during this pandemic. Dr. Thompson has really been the glue keeping all of higher ed talking and sharing ideas. I think Bob Jackson mentioned it yesterday, but I don't think there's ever been so much collaboration between universities and Kctcs. It's really been great. Kctcs is a system of 16 colleges. We serve more than 100,000 credit and 45,000 workforce students annually. We've got over 70 locations across the Commonwealth and a robust online program. Kctcs colleges assure access throughout the Commonwealth to credentials, leading to transfer and career success. As with the universities, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented many challenges to our students. I'm really proud on how our students, faculty, and staff have stepped up. Of course, Kctcs colleges are open access, so everyone has an opportunity to attend. Our students are significantly different from university students, though. Kctcs students are more likely to be the first person in their family to attend college, 54% versus 30%, have dependents, 33% versus 7%, have a household income less than $20,000, 32% versus 16%, be 25 or older, which is 46% versus 14%, and 51% of our students are underprepared for college level coursework when they enroll, compared to only about 10% of university students. This is a place where I'm very excited about the potential to improve that with the P20 continuum that Dr. Thompson and the Lieutenant Governor kicked off earlier this week, and which Kctcs is a part of. Many of our students are taking care of their children at home, assisting their K-12 students online, and many have lost their jobs. Our students balance jobs, families, and a multitude of non-academic barriers such as housing and food need, childcare, and transportation issues. As a matter of fact, out of our CARES funds in fall of 2020, $12 million went to students for food and housing insecurities. 76% of all Kctcs students received some form of financial aid in 2019-2020. 68% of our students paid $0 in tuition due to financial aid support, and only 15% of our Kctcs students rely on student loans to fund their education. As many of you know, the pandemic has turbocharged automation projects in many industries, and this is going to ultimately result in employees needing to reskill or potentially lose their job. Kctcs is going to be there to help get Kentucky back to work. We actively work with the Kentucky Department of Education, CPE, the Kentucky cabinets, industry, universities, and others on the future of work in Kentucky and how we can prepare a skilled workforce. In the agenda materials, you should have received the digital Kctcs profile. There's much more information in there, and I would welcome any questions. Dr. Thompson or Heather have got my personal contact information. If you take a peek at that profile and have any questions, please let me know. I'd now like to direct your attention to our placemat data. On the top left are our 3-year graduation rates. 1 year before the end of the strategic plan, Kctcs colleges have already met the target for graduation rates, total, low income, and underrepresented minorities. The total graduation rate has increased by nearly 10 percentage points since the 2015-16 baseline. While the URM graduation rate has increased by 7.8%, this is not keeping pace, and this is not something we're taking lightly. That said, I think it's important to note that since the implementation of performance-based funding in 2015-2016, Kctcs has seen a 40% increase in credentials awarded to underrepresented minorities, which helps continue to close that achievement gap. This compares to a 26% increase for other students. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Anton Reese, president of West Kentucky Community and Technical College, to speak to strategies supporting URM student success and the $15 million grant they just received because of their great work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zarapata, and good morning, Dr. Thompson and the CPE board. Let me say at the onset that I'm still processing that historic $15 million grant from Mackenzie Scott, still thinking it's a hoax even as we speak. Now, I know I only have 5 minutes, so I will give you a brief synopsis of Kctcs's URM successes and opportunities. So as indicated in the Kctcs level highlights, you can see that URM enrollment was increasing really prior to fall 2020, which as we know, as mentioned, the dual pandemic of COVID and social justice issues has a disproportionate impact, if you will. We also have opportunities though to continue to boost our retention and graduation rates. I believe that when I hear terms like enrollment, retention, graduation, they're all synonyms ultimately for relationships. So our strategy is having external and internal connections with organizations and institutions who have access, credibility, and connections to our URM populations. As someone involved in DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work for 30 years, I would tell you that it's tough, but necessary work, and it is consistent with our mission values as a Noble Door institution that we do continue to actively engage populations that may have been historically marginalized, like our African American population. It may be underserved populations, like our Hispanics in our area, Grays, Mayfield. But the bottom line is that through this gift, the vision I have is a 7-sector framework, which is a guarantee of what we're calling the WKCDC guarantee, a last dollar scholarship, and providing support and connections with DEI serving organizations who have trust and credibility with the very populations that I would submit to you are challenging to reach. A quick synopsis of the 7 sectors. Sector 1, under education. We want to guarantee with our K-12 counselors and administrators that any ATC, CTC, and our innovation hub, as it's called in Paducah, those students are pursuing those high wage, high demand fields will be able to come to college free. Likewise, as we speak, I have a meeting after this one on the higher ed side of things with Dr. Bob Jackson. Murray State has a promise. We have a guarantee. So we want to guarantee the promise that it's seamless for any heavily emphasis on adults, that it is seamless pathway for them to pursue a bachelor's degree. Sector 2 is those organizations, as I mentioned, like the NAACP, Black Greek organizations, Hispanic serving organizations, housing authorities that work daily with populations that we want to get access to. So we'll provide them some support and offer them a certain number of scholarships for them to help us recruit. Sector 3 is the rural areas of our region, 4 rivers, predominantly lower socioeconomic, poor whites, with challenges with Wi-Fi, broadband access, computer lab access, and transportation. So we want to provide some support there. Sector 4 is jobs, jobs, jobs. So we'll be working very closely with the chamber. I plan on sponsoring all of the minority businesses in this region, taking care of that chamber fee, and also providing some workforce training as to how to expand their businesses. Sector 5 and 6 is all about internal support. We believe that by diversifying our success coaching staff, implementing a supplemental instruction peer model, and moving to a student success center focused model will increase retention and graduation rates. Sector 7 is support for the organization through enrollment declines, small support for faculty and staff as a result of the national rankings that we continue to be fortunate, including, by the way, Aspen. So if you have time, tune in May 18th at 1 o'clock. We'll see if we finally ascend to the top of the heap. And last and certainly not least, we see this as a generational game changer to finally have the resources to remove barriers through historically Again, honor-prepared, URM, and diverse populations to be successful. Getting everyone to work is a win-win for everyone when we get all hands on deck. And that is my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Reese. Really appreciate it. Moving over to degrees and credentials awarded. That's on the top in the middle. Considering the credentials awarded, Kctcs has met all targets, contributing to the state's 60 by 30 goal. In fact, over 39,000 credentials, of the over 39,000 credentials Kctcs awarded in 19 and 20, nearly 80% were in one of the state's 5 targeted industry sectors, which are advanced manufacturing, business and IT, construction, healthcare, and then transportation and logistics. For 18-19, and despite having a total statewide population that ranked 26th in 2018, Kctcs ranked 8th in the nation in terms of overall number of credentials awarded by public 2-year institutions. Adjusting for population, Kctcs ranked 2nd nationally. On the top right, we have average credit hours to degree. This is a number that we want to keep pushing down, and we're making pretty good progress. Looking at the average credit hours to degree, Kctcs has already exceeded its target, but continues to show that pushing down. Some of this success came with the implementation of software that assures students are aware that they can only use their financial aid for classes within their program, and gives their advisor and the student an alert when they do so. If we could please move to the bottom left, which is enrollment. This is a challenging one. Kctcs, as well as community and technical colleges across the country, continue to have enrollment challenges. Nationwide, community and technical college enrollments tend to be cyclical. As the unemployment rate decreased over the last several years pre-pandemic, colleges such as those at Kctcs saw loss of students, particularly adult students, as they went to work. While enrollment levels were stabilizing and even increased slightly in fall of 19, COVID-19 is having a major impact on Kctcs colleges and across the country. It had a large impact on our enrollment in 20 and 21, particularly affecting workforce and fire rescue numbers and students transitioning to Kctcs directly from high school. A bit of good news is that URM enrollment dropped less than other students in fall of 2020. I can guarantee you we are working tirelessly to get enrollment back up through traditional and digital advertising, partnering with state agencies and the Kentucky Lottery for initiatives like the Work Ready Kentucky Scholarship, and using augmented staffing with a third party for campaigns to recruit students. In addition to this, we continue to focus on retention and make sure we're keeping the students we already have. Kctcs uses a predictive analytics platform to identify at-risk students before it's too late, which in turn triggers our strategic enrollment management teams to reach out to them. Moving on to first year to second year retention. Despite the decreases in overall enrollment in fall 2020, Kctcs continued to improve first year to second year retention rates, and Kctcs colleges have exceeded retention rates for overall, low income, and URM retention. While retention rates have grown by 4.5 percentage points since the baseline year, low income and URM retention rates have closed by 5.8 and 5.3 percentage points respectively. This is a leading indicator that points to narrowed graduation gaps that I talked about in the first graph when we talked about 3-year graduation rates. When we move over to the far right, transfers with associate's degrees, Kctcs college faculty and staff are working with students to help them meet their transfer desires through initiatives such as Kctcs's first online transfer fair, which was a big hit. This measure includes students graduating with the Associate of Applied Science or AAS degree. And while the AAS degree can be transferred and the degrees were included in the metric to promote transfer pathways, in reality, these students are going directly to work and not transferring until later in their career when more education is important to their success. It's important to note that AAS graduates earn on average $36,000 in their first year post AAS as they move directly into the workforce. If we move to the bottom left with dual credit, Dual credit enrollments, numbers of students, and credit hours attempted and earned have increased substantially over the past 4 years, up to 20,944 in 2019-2020. We're still enrolling dual credit students in spring of 2021, but we may see a small decrease of this population due primarily to COVID-19. But still, this population has been among our most stable. Moving to success in underprepared students in gateway courses, the big drop here is mainly due to a data quality issue on our end. Kctcs has worked with CPE leadership as we fully implemented the co-requisite model of offering gateway courses. Courses have also developed multiple math pathways to ensure that students are taking coursework appropriate to their desired career, which has led to increases in math success. We've been working with our college to improve data quality, particularly accurately reporting students who are exempt from the assessment and placement policy. Unfortunately, we over-reported the number of students considered exempt in fall of 2018, and these students were more likely to take a college English course, and the removal from the cohort resulted in a large decrease in the metric. Preliminary calculations for next year's report show that in reality, we are still seeing a very positive increasing trend in this metric with the introduction of the co-requisite English course. In fact, we should only be a few percentage points from meeting the Kctcs target for this next year. Lastly, average net price and total cost of attendance. Affordability is of great importance to our system of colleges. While the net cost and total cost of attendance did increase in 2018-19, you can see that our net cost is still lower than it was in the baseline year, even without adjusting for inflation. An increase in tuition scholarships has helped students with affordability. And of course, Kctcs costs less than half as much as attending a university. The net cost increase was primarily due to more students living independently rather than with their parents. That meant higher non-tuition living expenses. Preliminary 2019-2020 data indicate that while the cost of attendance went slightly up by $125, the net price students paid did decline by about $350. We are also proud that we serve our state's employers every day. Our general education programs provide training and work effectiveness skills while preparing students for their junior and senior year at a university. We've worked with CPE and the QA Commons on a third-party assessment of work effectiveness skills through a pilot program in 3 technical areas. Our technical programs and study are in tune with local industry needs and faculty work to provide experiences in the workplace while the student is in college. Each college has a program advisory committee of employers and program alumni in each technical field offered to ensure colleges are meeting industry needs. We've also redirected substantial funds to support the creation of more apprenticeship programs with industry and are a registered apprenticeship education sponsor as a system. Speaking of apprenticeships, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kelly Sellers, AVP of Technical Education at Jefferson Community and Technical College in Louisville, to speak on some of their apprenticeship efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Zarapata. Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Aaron, good to see you. It's been a long time. Good to see you, sir. And to our board, I'm going to take about 3 or 4 minutes to highlight a specific relationship we have with Trilogy Health, who's headquartered in Louisville, Kentucky. Trilogy Health has about 100+ long-term care facilities in a 4-state region in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Kentucky, headquartered in Louisville. And they're also moving into a pharmacy space as well. About 4 or 5 years ago, Trilogy started to explore alternative apprenticeship models that are non-traditional, such as medical nursing assistant. So after they created this medical nursing assistant apprenticeship program, they approached us at Jefferson and said, how do we take completers of this program and put them into JCTC and put them on a track? And not only a pre-nursing track, but also a track of non-nursing, because sometimes when you finish a nursing program, you realize you don't want to be a nurse. So we looked at how we give credit for those programs and transition them into associate degrees. Because of the success of that work and looking at that credit, then they worked and they developed a culinary apprenticeship program with our faculty at Jefferson. And what that program does is, as individuals within Trilogy finish that apprenticeship program, we award 20 hours of college credit toward our associate degree, and they finish the remaining 99% of that online. And yes, you can finish your culinary degree online because the courses that they're missing are mostly the management courses, finance, nutrition, cost and control, those types of courses. And then again, earning that associate degree. Now, because of that work, and because, as Dr. Zarapata just said, the recent funds we've allocated toward apprenticeships, Dr. Chris Williams and her team, along with the nursing faculty at Jefferson, have worked with Trilogy, and together we are creating a practical nursing apprenticeship program that will begin in fall 2021. And what's unique about that program is Trilogy is intentionally prepping their people with the prerequisite courses that they need, putting them on track. They're starting our one-year practical nursing program located in Carrollton, Kentucky, and our faculty are challenging themselves to think about how do we deliver these competencies online, how we deliver it hybrid, how do we think outside the box and differently when it comes to meeting the clinical and lab requirements to meet that goal. So we're on track to start that for the first time. We are very excited about that in fall 2021. Because of those successes, we're having 3 new conversations with Trilogy that's happened about the last 100 days, and that's around working together on a phlebotomy track, a pharmacy technician track, and potentially even a facilities management track. The goal for this is to look at these apprenticeship experiences as a partnership with the employer, work together on curriculum, give that credit for prior learning, moving them on that career pathway to an associate degree, and then, as Dr. Zarapata referenced, transitioning those individuals into local colleges and universities. As we work out the kinks and get this figured out, this is something that could potentially roll out across our other 15 community and technical colleges within Kctcs, simply because that healthcare footprint is big and it's continuing to grow. And as Dr. Zarapata said, with the economy, they're going to have their own workforce and development needs as well. So that's my 2 or 3 minutes. I'll hand it back over to Dr. Zarapata. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sellers. Finally, through our Workforce Solutions departments for 2019 and 2020, Kctcs colleges together served over 4,500 companies and provided workforce training for over 42,000 participants. The colleges administered over 52,000 assessments for industry certifications, pre-employment assessments, or licensure. Again, my thanks for the opportunity to share our overall strong data and some highlights from our colleges. And I invite you to visit your local Kctcs college to see the great ways that Kctcs colleges support better lives for a better Kentucky. I will now stop for questions, and that concludes my report, Chair Brandsetter.
Thank you, Paul, appreciate that. And Anton and Telly, thank you for your all's input as well. I'll open up the floor to some questions and commentary. Luke?
Yeah. I had this question at the end of Dr. Capilouto's presentation. I should have asked every folk that was joining, but for the folks at Kctcs, have you all noticed any impact to your students due to poor internet connectivity or internet availability?
Absolutely.
Since you guys are so dispersed throughout the state, what are you guys seeing with that?
So the first thing we had to do is we have got an inordinate number of students that have terrible broadband connectivity at home. The first thing we did was mobilize Wi-Fi in all of our parking lots. And so what that did, we also worked with, actually through CPE, we communicated this to all the university students as well. Since we've got a footprint across the entire state, we were able to put mobile Wi-Fi units up. We also, I'll give kudos to Jefferson and Louisville. They gave out over 500 refurbished computers that they added broadband cards to. We've also issued Wi-Fi hotspots to many of our students. We're hopeful. Right now, there's a broadband initiative going on where they're trying to get a test across the entire state of where broadband is at. And it's only going to get worse. There's a digital divide right now that's absolutely terrible. And even people who do have broadband, a lot of times it's not enough or they can't afford it. When the only game in town is, when there's only one ISP, they've kind of got the run, they can do whatever they want to it. No, just anecdotally here in Versailles, we've now got 3 internet providers, and magically all the costs have come down almost 50%. So it's a big deal. Particularly in Eastern and Western Kentucky.
Kim?
So thank you for that. I think just kind of piggybacking on that, as you look to kind of the upcoming school year, are you having to change some things, or do you anticipate there's going to be a learning gap of graduating seniors that would be coming into your program based on the fact that you'll have a wide disparity of in-person versus virtual teaching throughout the Commonwealth that occurred in 2020 for the 2020-21 school year?
We actually had a conversation about this on the national state directors, talking about how many students are getting lost in the system right now. I don't know what the numbers are in Kentucky, but in Alabama, they've lost 5,000 juniors and seniors that have just washed out of the system. And that's for numerous reasons, but we do anticipate some struggles coming up from these students that they could have lost a year or even more, as they try to come in. And so we're going to have to double down on advising. We're going to have to double down on being very intrusive with wraparound services and to help them out as much as we can, because we already get, I mentioned earlier, over 51% of our students are already underprepared. I expect that's going to go up significantly in the next year or so.
And so I'm just curious, I mean, I don't know exactly what your application standards are, but do you feel like there'll have to be some adjusting or softening of standards for entry for this upcoming class?
Being open access, there's a pretty low bar as it stands now. We are keeping a close eye on that, and we may have to adjust to keep the students enrolled. But it's a big unknown right now, and it is concerning for all of us.
Paul, let me jump on a couple of points. I'm gonna pick up where Kim had this, left off, and then there's a couple things I want to say that I think is important for us to think about Kctcs and the footprint that you hold and need to hold for us to get where we need to go in the state. A part of the issue that Kim brings up isn't about softening of standards, but as you well know, that we need to do a better job in this state of letting people know about Kctcs and the richness it could offer as a college, not just something that's training that people don't know is college. I mean, that's the issue we've all found out, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we've done a better job in our communications around this. And I think it's also important to understand we may have some opportunities to increase the likelihood that not just what we're doing at Be Still, but what we're doing around the Work Ready Scholarship and the Better Kentucky Promise and so on. I think it is important, though, that if you would spend just a few seconds here in a minute talking about the need for us to message why higher education is important and Kentucky higher education matters and how you guys are doing that, because I think it probably goes more to what Kim is asking than just what we do on the standards. But I want to I'll tell you, Anton and Telly, both of you make me feel old. You know that, right? I've known these guys, I won't tell you how long, but in a standpoint where I was still kind of in my education role and they were young people. So it's just good to see both of you in these positions doing what you're doing. And just so the council will know, to be an Aspen winner, that's what's happening in West Kentucky, and to be a college like Kctc and inner city Louisville dealing with all kinds of issues, but yet focusing in such a way to make sure that our underrepresented people aren't left behind, and the kind of relationship they have established, and they're doing it with all our Kctcs campuses, but the relationship that Telly and the folk over Kctc has done with the University of Louisville and some of the private institutions, what they're doing around Evolve 502, some of those other things. I mean, I really believe the council should hear some of these items along those lines too. So not to give you any hint Paul, but I think this is important for them to hear.
Yes, certainly. So one of the things President Thompson and I have talked about is that over the years, good, bad, or indifferent, Kctcs has got more national recognition than they do here in the state. That's probably for numerous reasons. But I see us turning the corner. It has to start with the legislature. I don't think, we've got many new faces in the legislature. They need to know what the Kctcs mission and what we're doing out for our students. Talking about the 502 scholarship in Louisville, those funds actually just came across our foundation yesterday. It is going to be a game changer. And I'm hoping that we start to see copycats in other cities, because it gives opportunity, just like the Kentucky Work Ready Scholarship does. It gives people that might not otherwise have the chance to go on to college. We really need to change the perception of Kctcs being the last option. And if you don't get into the college or university you want to, then you go to Kctcs. We need to make sure that students and parents understand that there's more than just the technical programs in here, that we do have, and President Thompson, with my predecessor, hammered out the transfer articulation legislation that guarantees transfer from Kctcs to the universities. I would be more than happy if your board is interested in some deeper dives to bring it back to one of your board meetings or whatever, and kind of showcase some of the things that we're doing.
Can I jump in? Aaron did some of what I was going to ask, but this is for Dr. Reese or Anton. The messaging issue. There are many students out there that still say, college is not for me. I'm not a college student, that sort of thing. You've got your 7 plans or 7 approaches, that sort of thing. But how do you get the mindset changed or the message changed to these people that they can go to school? You have different avenues, and you may have addressed a little of that, but it wasn't clear to me.
Paul, can you take that? I don't think Anton's on with us.
Is he not here?
I don't see him anymore.
There's numerous ways. I'll give an example in advanced manufacturing. There's a perception that a lot of our programs are, for example, in advanced manufacturing, what things were in the 60s. And the parents think that it's just not a good thing to go into. They picture these dark and dank manufacturing facilities, and they just don't have the awareness, and it needs to happen on both sides. But we need to work with these students more closely. I think dual credit, and while I know there was some discussion yesterday about how dual credit's not for everybody, I do think that dual credit gives students the opportunity to show themselves that they can succeed. Where we really need to get a little bit more focus on is to make sure that students in high school and their parents know which dual credit programs they need to have so that they're most effective when they transfer on to either us or a university. And
also for the trilogy apprenticeships and that sort of thing, what's the credential that they come out of that program? It's LPNs because they're not registered nurses, or are they? Or what is the credential that they end up with out of the nursing programs?
When they finish this fall, start fall 2021, they'll come out with a diploma in practical nursing, which typically can be a 1-year to 18-month program. And to give a good example, there's about 500 jobs open right now in Louisville just in practical nursing. That is basically the first year of a registered nurse RN program is what practical nursing is. And then what's happening is because of that, as we're rethinking our curriculum, all LPNs, even those who have been in the system for a while working, can come to the Jefferson nursing programs and in 1 more year, finish that and become an RN. And to put things in perspective, in the last 90 days, there were over 2,000 RN jobs. That includes bachelor's that were open in the Louisville market in the last 90 days. So this is we talk about the talent pipeline with the chamber that's happening and all this. We're trying to rethink how we're putting more people in that pipeline, to your point, and stacking those credentials so students can be successful. Because to your point, they may not be able to perform at this point for whatever reason, could be non-academic at that associate degree level. So this is designed, they can work, earn money, and complete that nursing program, take care of their family, and then transition at their own pace as they move through.
Harry says, I mean, this point that he's making, I think the council should understand, we have so many needs around just nursing alone. I won't even tell you all the other healthcare issues we have. We can't set up enough clinicals work. And Chris Williams on here, she can tell you the conversation we're having right now around this, that we're going to have to grow your own like you guys are doing. It's great that we have CNAs and all that, but we need people to come into this market on the pipeline with at least an LPN in order to advance it quick enough for us to get where we're going. So this grow your own needs to, I don't even know how much, and our four-year comprehensives need to get involved in it. And a lot of other folks in partnership with our Kctcs campuses and our healthcare organizations to make it happen. But we're going to have to more than quadruple down on this very, what I think, a very innovative action that you all are doing at JCTC. And Chris can attest to that, I think, right, Chris?
Certainly, I can attest to it. We really appreciate the leadership out of the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Cabinet for Education and Workforce Development and looking to expand those nursing pathways. There's a real need, and the Kentucky Chamber's talent pipeline management work has just, with collaboratives of employers across the state, has just also documented that. So we appreciate the support, Dr. Thompson, from CPE in those efforts.
Luke?
I just had a comment talking about to Dr. Statt's point of how do we change the perception. I think that's something that may be unique to KCTCS, but I think it's across the board. Not only can these kids go to college? Can these students go to college? But they can afford college, right? I think that there's this belief that college is too expensive. It's too hard. I can't do it, right? And we've seen it, the last 2 days. We see the net price, but then the I'll call it the list price. The list price is high, right? And I think Dr. Capilouto mentioned, a lot of his students' average income, their parents are $19,000 a year, and when they see a sticker price of $27,000 a year, it's a non-starter for a lot of people. So, I welcome the efforts, any efforts from any of the institutions to counteract that perception, because the reality is quite different, and we know it because we live it every day. We think about it, but a lot of people they just don't. So that's just a comment.
One of the things that we did, because we knew we were going to get just members of the general public when we turned on that Wi-Fi at all of our campuses, was to put a splash screen up that showed our cost in comparison to the universities. Now the universities don't want to hear that, but anyway, it laid it out on what an average cost of attendance was for a student, and highlighted some of our programs, and that was a good way for us to kind of get that word out.
Yeah.
Last time we looked, we've had over 450,000 unique devices connect up to our Wi-Fi network. So it's been a pretty successful program.
Excellent.
Actually, though, to me, one of the things that has to come through is the return on investment for the education. Yes, it's going to cost some, but the staff have put together lots of information on just how much more each educational step brings in, and that far outweighs the initial cost.
Yeah, there's kind of a narrative nationally now that the value proposition of higher education is not there, and that's just not true. And you're right, we do need to clearly articulate that, and I think sometimes that message gets lost.
Yeah.
To pull on what Luke was saying and what Dr. Stack was saying too, I think it's important. These, first of all, the net price, understand, is $6,817. Double that by 2.5, which is about how long you take to get an associate degree on your campus. That return on investment is $422,000. That's Kentucky numbers with Kentucky students. We're not using a national number here. This is something we don't talk enough about. Paul, I will also tell you that during this past COVID time, we worked out ways to get our students through with these certificates and degrees so they can go in the workforce, and we kept them safe. A lot of people don't know how we worked that out, but we did. That took some considerable effort, so I appreciate you and your crew. Chris, what you're doing with curricular alignment, we talked about dual credit, where students will know what they take goes into a certificate or a degree, is crucial for us to make sure that our students also have an affordable way and know that this dual credit counts for something other than accumulating hours. So there's a lot of these pieces that I think are, and the other thing we responded to couple, 2 or 3 years ago is this need to get more of our students through our Kctcs pipeline to get them to those middle skilled jobs. Yeah. And because of that, we have less unemployment than we would have had if you look at the numbers specifically about those who got those certificates, who maintained their employment versus they would have been unemployed if they hadn't gotten it. So I do want to appreciate you all for really working with us and tripling down on making sure that that happened when the call went out.
Yeah, just to give a little context to that, President Thompson thankfully was able to negotiate for us to open up and test out our remaining technical students. We had 9,000 of them that had assessments that needed to be done face-to-face. We were able to do those in a safe manner. As Dr. Capilouto mentioned, we don't have one record of a student being in one of our classrooms and getting the virus from that exposure. So we have been very careful. We've been working closely with Dr. Stack and with CPE and making sure that we keep everybody healthy.
All right, anybody else from the floor have any comments or questions? We've got a few more minutes, but I don't mind ending this early if we're all set and squared away. Just make sure everybody gets a chance to speak.
No, just say thank you for your presentation today. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. We've got a great team here, and again, I appreciate everything the council does, and I look forward to keeping the momentum going.
Great. All right, Paul, Tilly, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. That has been a whirlwind presentations that we've been able to listen to. Thanks for everybody's hanging on there and engaging with all the presidents during the last day. That wraps up our the formal part of the presidential presentations. Does anybody have any commentary that they would like to insert at this point in time prior to us adjourning for this part of our meeting? I'll just kind of open up the floor if there's any general commentary or comments from everybody.
Ben, this is Carol. I've just got one question on the placemats. I know we were talking yesterday about how we were so pleased with the updated information, but on the average net price and total cost of attendance, they didn't include on any of the placemats 19 and 20. And I was just curious why, because we have mostly 19 and 20 other data.
That's a good question, Carol. Aaron, you're on it. See if you can answer that one.
Yeah, mainly because of the way that the cycle runs with Title IV. The way it runs is, and I wish Dave was here. I think it's summer, fall, spring, and because of that, we would have one piece of that not available yet. So we wouldn't have the data. We should have that data though in the spring of this year to know that. David, how close am I to answering that question correctly? Well, he may not hear me.
I hear you now, sorry. So that is a federal metric, and so we can give preliminary on that, if the board would want to go in that direction. But on the rest of the placemat, we give final numbers only. So since that's a federal metric, they have a significant lag time. So we wait for the final release, but we could mark that as preliminary and give you a calculated number internally from the state of Kentucky. But that's the primary reason.
Yeah, this is a national comparison IPEDS metric, which measures what I just got through saying in that time limit. But we probably could figure something out if y'all want a preliminary now. I mean, not this instant, but
come on, David.
Out of the hat.
Well, and maybe a happy compromise would be that we put a preliminary on our data center, and then we'll replace it with the final once the federal audit takes place, and we finalize it with.
All right. One of the other elements that we've been working on this year, or we continue to work on, is how things relate to the performance over the last few years, and how that relates to our overall statewide strategic agenda of 60 by 30. Are there any other? Does anybody have any comments or thoughts about how what we've heard in the last 2 days is going to play into our ability to stay above the line with respect to our trajectory on that front?
I'm comfortable.
You guys must be hungry.
Yeah.
Okay. At least you're honest about it, Bob. That's good. All right. Just a reminder, our business meeting starts at 1 o'clock today. So I believe there is a different link, but everybody should be able to figure that out. Unless there's any objections, I say we go ahead and adjourn and meet back up at 1 o'clock, if that's good with everybody.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.